Brian Doc Bartlett, United States Army, Vietnam. Folks, I had the great honor today of interviewing in my home studio in Colorado. It's October 24, 2023, Doc Bartlett. He served as a platoon medic, a combat medic in Vietnam. And folks, it doesn't get any worse or any better than that as far as combat. Doc emailed me back in June and knew that I was interviewing veterans again, and he's watched several dozen of my interviews already. He was ready. He asked me if I would interview him before he died. Of course I said yes. So Doc flew out here at his own expense from Reno, Nevada yesterday through Denver into Montrose, Colorado to Grand Junction, Colorado, and we had a 2-hour interview today, and you're going to see most of it here in this video. Doc has changed my life. His story was life-changing. Deeply touched by what he shared. Through his young eyes and ears in Vietnam, he served in 1970 and 71 in Vietnam, 22 years old, so he's kind of one of the older guys. He turned 22, I believe, in 1970 in March, and kind of one of the older guys at 22, believe it or not. But boy, what a story he told me today. I'm just still reeling in what he shared with me just a couple of hours ago here. And I'm happy to share it with you today. He was, like I said, a platoon medic. He was assigned the MOS of 90, I believe it was 91B Bravo, which is a medic in the military. Most grunts were 11Bs, 11 Bravos. But he got the assignment to be a medic, and he went to Fort Sam Houston in Texas, I think for 10 weeks to train as a medic. Before that, he was up in the state of Washington for his basic training. And he's had a tough life, man. You're going to hear some of it in this story. But so he's on his way to Vietnam, and he tells the story so amazingly, and some of the casualties he treated, and just the things he saw. Like I said, he's 100% disabled with PTSD. I've spent a couple of days with him. Going to take him to the airport tomorrow, and we've just connected. We're friends. One of my new friends and one of my new heroes, Doc Bartlett. So I'm going to share some pictures with you after this introduction, and just take a look at them. I mean, all the pictures I've gathered over the years, but this one really hit home, folks. Really hit home. I've got Navy corpsmen in my documentaries and on my Voices of History radio station and YouTube channel. I don't know if I have an Army medic. I know of a man who won't talk that was a medic. I might have one or two in my archives. I just don't know right now. But right now, Doc's my Army medic, and he served with the 3rd Platoon Delta Company, which was the 1st of the 52nd, 198th Light Infantry Brigade, which was a part of the Americal Division. Served proudly, folks. Came home changed, never the same. Again, the PTSD has haunted him all these years, and I hope and I pray that he will live more years on this earth. He's suffered a lot in his life, and you'll see it in his eyes, in his face. But folks, let's rally around this man. I was thinking today, interviewing him, write him a card or a letter and send it to me. I'll put my address in the video description. Would you please do that? And then I will send those to him personally from you. So you can email it, I guess, also, if you want to do an email, and I'll just send him the email. But if you want to send a card or a letter, I'll put my address in the video description. But let's rally around. Let's thank him for his service. On behalf of all the Vietnam veterans, thank you, Doc Bartlett, for what you did. You're a great man in my eyes, and hopefully you'll have many more years on this earth. So I salute you, sir. God love you, and thank you for sharing your story with me. Thank you for entrusting your story with me. And now I share it with my YouTube family, those out here that are dedicated to this station and stories like Doc's. Thank you for watching, listening, and sharing. God bless you. Okay. Well, it's good to have you here today.
Thank you.
And you've come a long ways. So I really appreciate that. And I think this is going to be a great time. I slept okay last night, but I was thinking a lot about this interview, and it's going to be good. So let's just go back to Vietnam today. That's what we're going to do. 53 years ago, I didn't even ask you, but tell me what year you went to Vietnam.
I arrived in Vietnam on January 30th of 1971, or 70.
January 30th, 1970.
Yes.
What year did you graduate from high school?
1966.
So you were 17, 18 in high school?
Yeah, I was 18 when I graduated.
Okay. Tell me what you remember about Vietnam during high school. Was it a serious thing? Was it an afterthought? I mean, did the kids talk about it and some of the young boys think someday you might go to Vietnam? What were your thoughts back then in high school?
Actually, it wasn't even on my radar. I was more interested in being a kid.
So you got out of high school, you graduated, and what'd you do then?
Well, it was on the radar enough so that I knew I needed to go to college. So I started at UNR Reno, and I went to college for 2.5 years.
Were you drafted?
Yes and no. I knew a lot about the military because my dad was career naval. He was in the Navy from 1934 to 1962, and he was in naval aviation. I was actually born on Pensacola, the home of naval aviation. And he raised me in a military way. He was a lieutenant commander, and so I needed to know proper etiquette at meals when he had to, eat with other officers. And then in college, I went to ROTC for 2 years because it was required at that time. And so I knew how to shine shoes and polish buckles, and I could march and do the manual of arms in college. And so, but on the other hand, I knew that the pretty hippie girls, it was a lot better to be like a rock climbing instructor than a ROTC cadet. I forgot your question.
No, I'm just wondering what you did after college, after high school into college, and then I want you to lead me up till, if you were drafted, did you enlist, and what branch of the military did you go in?
Oh, okay. I quit college at in the middle of my junior year, and I went up to Alaska, and I was working as a mountain climbing guide for the Institute of Arctic Biology, and they were doing research on Mount McKinley. It was actually an Army project called Project Themis. They were worried that the Chinese were going to cross the Himalayas and get involved in Southeast Asia, and so I finished that project right about the time that the draft was aware that I wasn't in school anymore, and so it was the end of the project, and I was in Fairbanks and unemployed. So I volunteered for the draft. So I'm RA, regular Army, but it was just when you volunteer for the 2 years, you don't get any choice of MOS. It's just like being drafted. So I was sort of drafted, but I'm RA.
So you went into the Army?
Yes.
What were you, about 20 years old then, 21?
I'd just turned 21.
Okay, your thoughts at that time about Vietnam? I mean, were you thinking, someday I'm going to be there? Were you thinking it's every young man's duty to go to Vietnam? What were you thinking?
Well, I had mixed feelings. I guess I was pretty neutral. I just thought it was something I'd do and get it over with, you know. So I wasn't feeling super patriotic, but I didn't want to go to Canada.
Did you have friends that were going and you knew them, and did maybe some not come back at that time in your life?
No, I had no connection with Vietnam at all, really.
Was it a looming fear or a looming just a bad thought in your mind, or was it like you said, just go there, do your time, and get out?
Yeah, I had no idea how bad it was there, and so I just thought I'll do my time and get out.
Had you ever traveled much? You been out of the country before?
Yeah,
At that time?
yeah, I had bummed around down in Mexico, and I'd done quite a bit of mountain climbing.
Tell me about basic training. Where did you go?
I went to Fort Lewis, Washington, and I did fine at basic training because I was in shape for mountain climbing, and I knew enough military stuff so that I was just invisible in basic training. I didn't screw up.
Was it tough? What was the hardest part of basic training for you?
The hardest part was my dad was very prejudiced against the Japanese. I mean, he hated them. And it seemed like the drill instructors were very prejudiced against Asians. You know, they taught us to call them nips, dinks and slopes and gooks, you know, and so I didn't like that because I didn't want to be prejudiced. But as far as the military stuff, it was fine. I qualified as an expert with the M16, and the physical part was fine because I was in good shape.
How about mentally? Was it tough?
Well, there was one incident that was kind of tough. I made friends with a guy named David Samuels, and he was a graduate student in majoring in physics, and they drafted him. And he and I became friends, and he said partway through the course, he said, he says, I'm out of here. I hope you won't miss me. And I didn't know what he meant, but our drill instructor left us at attention and just went and had coffee or something. And David went up in front of the group and he started leading them in the Country Joe and the Fish, I feel like I'm fixing to die rag. And 3 drill instructors came out and dragged him away, and I never saw him again. So that was probably the hardest thing in basic, losing that friend.
So what was your MOS?
I was 91 Bravo, which is infantry medic.
Why did you pick that MOS?
I didn't. When we graduated, it said everybody was getting 11B rifleman, and mine said 91B. So I went and asked the drill instructor, what's 91B? And he says, oh, you're in deep shit. That's combat medic.
You had no idea?
I had no idea.
That's amazing. You weren't a military or a medical person per se, and they put you in that military occupation.
I tried to do really good on the battery of tests that they gave because I was hoping to get a clerk's job. And so maybe that had something to do with it.
So when did you begin your advanced training, and how did it go, and what did you learn?
Well, I went to Fort Sam Houston, Texas, which is where they train the medics. And it was only a 10-week course. And so I figured I was into it by then, and I studied really hard. And I graduated as an honor student from medic training, got a certificate from the colonel for being in the top of the class. I wasn't first, I imagine, but I did well. And then it was 2 weeks leave, and there was 625 in my graduating class, and over 600 of us got orders for NOM. There was just a few that were like congressmen's nephews or something that didn't go.
I role play a lot in life and situations that I might be in. Did you do that with your medical training, thinking someday you might be on a battlefield and treating casualties? And during your medical training, were you aware of that, thinking about that?
Yeah, because our instructors were medics that had returned from NOM, and they tried to wake us up as much as they could.
Is there how can I put this? Is there a phrase, a motto, a quote, or something that you lived by that really encapsulated what you would be doing in a battlefield situation? I'm thinking of, do they tell you to stay calm, don't tell the guy they're going to die? I mean, are there certain basic things they tell you, or are they going to say it's just going to be chaos and do the best that you can?
Well, their emphasis was on keeping the troops in the field, and I can't remember the medic's motto. To conserve the power of the force. That's the medic's motto. In other words, they want you to keep the troops in the field at all costs, and that was what they drummed into us.
What did they teach you about a mass casualty situation or triage, and how to prioritize the injuries?
We went through all that. It was they were doing well at telling us what we were going to be facing.
How can you really simulate combat battle situations in training? How do you simulate that?
You can't. Once you're in it, it's, my God, I'm at the gates of hell, and you can't do that in a 10-week course.
Did you have any fear, apprehension going into the training, and as you were nearing the end of the training? Did you feel prepared and equipped that you can handle anything?
We were pretty much all terrified by the end of the course.
Did you become close with some of these students that were working with you?
No, I don't remember any of them. The only guy I remember was we had to do IVs on each other, and the guy I got was this, he turned out to be a nice guy, but he was this giant black guy that looked like a linebacker, and so it's harder to do IVs on people with dark skin because you can't see their veins. And so, I remember the whole thing, it's 30-degree angle, bevel up, insert, lower to 15-degree angle, and then slide it into the vein. Well, I couldn't find his vein. This guy just looked over it and he said, "This time I recommend you find it." And I found it, but he turned out to be a nice guy.
Did you ever wonder what happened to some of these guys after the war? Like, did they all make it? Or, I don't know, percentage-wise, how many medics are killed in combat? Like, in World War II, a number of Navy corpsmen were killed, like on Iwo Jima and things. I mean, a high number. But secondly, do they teach the Geneva Convention and how the enemy is supposed to respect a medical person or not? Do they teach stuff like that?
Well, no, they told us that that went out the window in World War II. So, if anything, you know, you're more of a target because they want to knock out the platoon CP, and so if they see a medic or a radio man, they know the lieutenant's there too and the platoon sergeant, so they zero in on them. Generally, I think being so there's different kinds of medics. You know, you got your medevac medics, which is dangerous because they're getting shot at, and you got your hospital medics, which is what we all wanted to be, and none of us got there. And then you got your combat medic, and the death rate for combat medics is probably 3 to 5 times as much as for infantrymen, and there's a lot of reasons for that. One reason is that in a firefight, the first thing you do is hit the deck, and when somebody gets injured, they yell medic, and you have to jump up in the firefight and run to whoever's shot. And while the riflemen get to find a hollow or a depression or anything to give them a little cover, when the medic gets to a casualty, he can't lie down. You can't work on somebody lying down, so you're on your knees crouching, but you know, you're still 2 feet off the ground. And so a lot of medics got killed working on casualties, because you can't really, if you're in a rice paddy or something, you can't drag a 180-pound guy off somewhere. You got to work on him where he is. And then there's the whole thing about booby traps, because our main casualties were gunshot wounds and booby traps. And when you're running to a booby trap, you know that the Viet Cong puts booby traps in clusters, because if there's a casualty, what's going to happen is that area is going to become a center of activity. You're going to set up a perimeter for the medevac, and that's going to be moving around in that area. So they put booby traps. They don't just put one booby trap. They put several in the same area. And so while the medic is running up to the booby trap, he knows that that's not the only booby trap that's there. And they're so good at hiding them. It's like we had this elephant grass that's like 8 feet tall, and it's got razor sharp edges. But what they would do is they would take this 8-foot elephant grass, and when they would put a booby trap on a tripwire, they wouldn't leave the wire so you could see it. They'd wrap the wire in twisted elephant grass, and so it's invisible. It doesn't, you can stop and look at it, it just looks like a piece of grass that fell over. So there's no way you can tell what's going to happen when you run up to this guy, and a lot of medics were killed running up to whoever hit the booby trap. I forgot what your question was.
No, you're doing good. You're in Vietnam. I'm still back in training. But no, this is good. Listen. You're not premature. This is all good. Okay. So, just finish up your advanced training. It was how many weeks at medical training in Fort Sam?
It was 10 weeks.
Okay. So, was there a graduation?
I suppose. I don't remember it.
Tell me what happened after graduation, and at what point do you get orders to go to Vietnam?
We got orders for Vietnam at graduation, and we got 2 weeks leave.
So you came home?
Well, I didn't have a home. I was, my parents were dead, and my brother and I kind of lost track, so I just kind of goofed around for 2 weeks.
In Texas?
I didn't have a home address.
You just stayed in Texas for 2 weeks, or
Uh,
did you go to Vegas and gamble and figured this might be your last 2 weeks at home?
I don't remember that 2
Okay.
weeks.
That's okay. That's okay. So after 2 weeks, you had to report somewhere. And do you remember where you reported? And tell me about going to Vietnam.
Well, it was San Francisco.
So you got to San Francisco.
Yeah, and I got my first Article 15 because I had a friend named Ed Titus that lived in San Francisco, and I was supposed to report, and he says, what the heck, let's go have fun for a day. So we went down to Haight-Ashbury and all that, and I goofed off for a day, and I reported a day late to go to Vietnam. I figured, what are they going to do, send me to Nam? And I got an Article 15, which was just like I lost 2 weeks' pay. And then 707 to Da Nang. You know, there's Da Nang's up in I Corps, and there's 3 main cities in I Corps. The northern one is Hue, and then Da Nang, and the southernmost one is Quang Ngai City. Well, but Da Nang's the biggest base, so that's where the 707s come in.
So tell me, you flew a commercial airline from San Francisco to Da Nang, not nonstop?
No, we went through Alaska, and we landed in Alaska and landed in Japan.
Did you change planes? You probably don't remember. That doesn't matter.
No, in fact, I don't even think they let us off the plane.
So as you get closer to Vietnam, do you remember your thoughts, your feelings, emotions? Is it like, oh no? I mean, are you just wanting to get it over with, or you feel you're trained and you're ready to go?
We were all terrified.
Young men.
Yeah.
You were probably old.
Yeah, I was. Matter of fact, I turned 22 right after I got there, which was about the age of the company commanders, you know. And so most of the grunts in my platoon, some of the less educated ones thought I was an MD. Most of them thought at least I was an RN or had 6 months or a year of training. They didn't know I only had 10 weeks of training. I didn't tell them.
Got lots of questions. Tell me the unit you were with, company, battalion, regiment, division. Give me the whole breakdown.
Okay, well, for the first 7 months, I was with an infantry platoon, and I was the 3rd platoon medic in Delta Company, 1st of the 52nd, which is 1st Battalion, 52nd Regiment. And then I was in the 198th Infantry Brigade and in the Americal Division.
Was that referred to as a light infantry brigade?
Yes.
I've got some veterans from that brigade. Okay, so you said platoon medic for,
Yes.
Did you say C Company?
Delta Company.
Delta Company. Just one medic for Delta Company?
No, there was 4 medics. There was 3 platoons.
3 platoons.
And 1 medic for each platoon, and then there was a head medic for the company who stayed with the company CP.
Wow, you're a combat platoon medic.
Yeah.
And I would think if I was a grunt or I was in combat or going to be in combat, I would want to be close to you.
Well,
other than maybe the chaplain, I'd want to be close to you.
Well, it was
Or know that you're nearby.
Well, it was a mixed bag because the medic was in some ways the most powerful man in the platoon, because the medic had control over whether you could go to the rear or not. And so I tended to stay physically and emotionally separated from the men, and there was lots of reasons for that. One of which is if they got in a group, we called it a clusterfuck, and the medic didn't want to be there because if that group blew up, there'd be no medic. And so also I didn't want to get too chummy with them because of my power to send them to the rear. You know, and I got to know the guys in the platoon, which ones were screw-ups and which ones weren't. And the screw-ups were always trying to find a way to get out of the field. Like they'd volunteer to be a tunnel rat, and then they'd go in the tunnel and they'd come out with 2 holes in their hand and say they got bit by a bat. So I would send them to the rear for rabies shots. And so if I knew he was a fuck up, I'd just say, don't poke yourself again, get back, get back. And they'd fake fevers. You know, it's like one of my jobs as medic was to give the malaria pills, because there was 2 kinds of malaria in Vietnam. There was falciparum, no, there was Vivax and falciparum. And so I would give the pills for that. The Vivax was the most common malaria, and it was treatable with 1 large red pill a week. And the other was falciparum, which was far more dangerous, and we had to give a pill for that every day, a little white pill every day. And the pills were only like partly effective, but we didn't tell them that. But the falciparum had a habit of the little bugs could beat the blood-brain barrier, and they would get malaria in their brain, which would kill them. And so the troops didn't want to take the pills. For one reason is the one for the more serious one gave you diarrhea, and a lot of troops openly wanted to get malaria so they could get to the rear. So we had a general rule that they had to have a fever of 104 for 24 hours before we'd allow them to go to the rear. I forgot the question.
Oh, you're doing great. We're just talking about your platoon.
Oh,
you're a combat medic, and you're sharing some powerful things I've never heard before with all my interviews. So from your perspective, from your eyes, from your ears, you're 22 years old. You're in a combat platoon in Vietnam. Tell me, let's just talk about some of the skirmishes and some of the casualties that you had to treat. And do you remember the first person you might have treated? Or just give me an incident where you had a firefight or whatever, and tell me about what happened, the call for medic, and just tell me the scene.
Well, the very first one, I kind of lucked out, because we were at what they called a pacified ville, which was really a fancy word for concentration camp. But my platoon was out laying more wire around the ville, and they hit a booby trap, and it badly injured 4 guys, messed up their bodies and legs and everything. But because I was with because we're in this pacified ville, the other medics were there, and so for my first casualty, I didn't have to do it by myself. My second casualty was an entirely different matter. We were out on patrol, and we got sniper fire, which is a daily event, sometimes 2, 3, 4 times in a day, and the thing was always the same. We'd return fire with small arms and mortars, and then we'd call in artillery, and then we'd have to go and see what happened there. And so what they do is they fire at us and then run away, and they know that they want to lead us in a certain direction because they've set booby traps for us. And so so that happened, and it was about an hour later, and we were moving to, I can't remember what they called it, but you got to go look, and because they want a body count. And so you have to go to where the artillery was, And I never walked at the front. I'd walk a ways back so that when something went off, I could get there quickly, but I wasn't injured. And so this woof went off, and this white cloud of sparkly things came over us and landed all around us, and that was the call of medic. And so I ran up there, and the guy's name was Tim Borden, and he was burning from head to foot with white phosphorus, and he had an arm blown off at the elbow, and one of his legs was shattered to the point that it was just bone, all the meat was gone. But he was covered with white phosphorus, and white phosphorus ignites automatically at room temperature. And so somehow he was still on his feet. And so I had to knock him down. And the white phosphorus will keep burning all the way to the bone. And so the first thing I noticed was that his hand grenades were covered with burning white phosphorus, which burns at 5,000 degrees, and steel melts at 2,000. And so the first thing I thought was, these are the last few seconds of my life, because these grenades are going to cook off any second. And so I grabbed a bandage to hold the grenades with, and then one by one I cut them off and threw them away before they exploded. And then I remember his eyes, there wasn't anything wrong with his eyes. He had blue eyes, and I knew he was dead, and he knew he was dead, because, you know, basically we're a bag of water, and if you get burnt that much, you dehydrate to death, because they can't put enough IVs in you to keep you from drying out. So I pumped him, not full of morphine, because that would have killed him right then, but I gave him morphine, and then I screamed for everybody to bring me their canteens. And I took my helmet and I started making mud with dirt and the water from the canteens, and trying to cover up as much of his body as I could with mud to put out the white phosphorus. And he was alive when we put him on the chopper, but he died 3 days later. And that was my first casualty I did by myself.
Horrifying.
Yeah, we lost 2 other guys from that, because in Vietnam they had re-up sergeants, and you could, if you re-upped for 3 years, they'd give you a job in the rear as a truck driver or a cook or something. And so 2 of the guys from the platoon, after they saw that, they were on the next chopper out for the re-up sergeant.
How many months were you in combat?
7, well, 12, sort of, but I was with a platoon for 7 months.
Were you always with Delta Company the whole time?
Yes, for that 7 months.
Mm-hmm. I know you have many stories you could tell, and I'm not even after the blood and guts of war, but, you know, from the eyes of a medic, and what you saw. Just, what was it, Tim Borden? You said Tim?
Yeah.
Yeah. Tell me about just your tour. You were there from 70 to 71.
Yes.
Okay. Tell me, as you continued, I'm going to jump back for one of my favorite questions is when you first got to Vietnam, what did it feel like, smell like, look like when you got off that plane?
Well, all I remember, it was everything was in a big confusion and rush because I got there right at the annual Tet. 68 Tet was the big one, but the NVA made it a tradition after that, and they did Tet every year. And so I arrived on January 30, and on February 1st, I hadn't processed out to Delta Company yet, and the shit hit the fan. There was, like, I think Chulai got 200 rockets, and the outer fire bases were getting overrun, and it was a big mess. And so I remember everything was in a hurry when I got there, so I don't really remember anything other than it's like they put me to, I got to the, so for the medical platoon, the battalion has a headquarters back in Chulai, which was like 20,000 people. Mm-hmm. And so I went to it's called HHC, Headquarters Company. And so I just went there from the airport, and they put me to work right away in the pharmacy, packing drug supplies that all the fire bases were calling for and everything. Mm-hmm. So I just remember everything being in a rush right away.
So back into the combat situations. Are you resupplied? Where do you get your supplies from? Do you run out of supplies? Do you carry plasma? Do you get plasma on the battlefield?
Well, the way it worked for our company is our battalion forward headquarters was on a place called Landing Zone Stinson, which was kind of the most westerly, larger, it was like 400 guys on Stinson. They had artillery and everything. And so our supplies would come on a chopper from Stinson. And the way the companies were in the field for 3 weeks. So our time in the bush was a 21-day rotation, and then we got 7 days on Stinson, which wasn't a break because we still had to go out on patrols from Stinson, but at least we were on a fire base at night for those 7 days. But when we were in the field, we'd get a resupply chopper every 3 to 5 days. Mm-hmm. And so on that chopper, we'd put in a request for what was going to come out on the next chopper. Mm-hmm. And
so you said there were 4 medics with the company?
Yes.
Did any of them get wounded or killed?
Lots.
Medics?
Yeah.
Yeah? So they replaced them with new medics then?
Right.
So can you tell me an incident? Were you with the person when they were killed or wounded, or who was it?
Yeah. One of my best friends was named Mark Gross, and he was a Jewish stockbroker from New York City, and he was a medic in my with me. He was and they were. He was in a different platoon, and they were going up on a hilltop to set up a NDP, a night defensive position, and the guys in the platoon didn't want to go up there because whenever a hilltop is used, you need to prepare it before you go back again. What they do is, because any hilltop or any place that you've been before is going to be booby trapped, and so generally what they do is put Bangalore torpedoes. I don't know if you know what they are. Yeah, they put Bangalore torpedoes up the hill and blow a clear away. Well, they had a new guy in charge who didn't want to do that, so they went up on top of the hill, and there was Eugene. Well, there was two medics. One I didn't know as well, but anyway, there was 13 killed. It was a command detonated. In other words, some enemy watched them go up there, and then when they were sitting up at the top, he just blew them away, and it was probably a 155 millimeter artillery round, which has a kill radius of about half a football field. And so there was 13 killed, and that included two medics, Mark Gross and Eugene Brown, I think was the other medic, and the chaplain, his name was Phil Nichols. He also happened to be with him, and he was blown away. And that happened on October 13th. But also, the medic that replaced me, so I spent 7 months in the field and then 5 months on landing zone Chippewa, which is a different story. But I left the field on August 27th. So I was in the field from February 1st to August 27th. My platoon radio man, his name is John Irvin, and so he was probably my best friend in Vietnam, because in the platoon CP, usually the platoon lieutenant and the platoon sergeant. Our lieutenant was named Bill Poland, and our sergeant was named Ricky Hopkins. They'd make a foxhole together, and the medic and the RTO would make a foxhole together, and so the medic and the RTO were kind of always together. And so when I went to Chippewa, I didn't go to the rear. I went from 3rd Platoon to Chippewa on the 27th. And 4 days later, on August 31st, they were out on patrol, and John Irvin hit a booby-trapped artillery round, and it killed John, and it killed Roger Scarborough, who was the medic that replaced me, and he'd only been with the platoon for 4 days. And John and Roger were both dead 4 days after I left them.
When you're out in the field and somebody is wounded or mortally wounded, I've heard this from other medics or corpsmen throughout the years of the stories I've done. Did you ever hear a cry for God or Mama? They would call for their mothers. Did you ever hear anything like that?
I can't say I have. Usually they're kind of out of it and in shock. I did hear a lot of stuff like that when there wasn't anything going on, because the medic was also kind of the well, a lot of guys wanted to use the medic to get permission to like go see the psychiatrist or something, because they couldn't handle things anymore. And so I was like a counselor to them, explaining why I couldn't let them get out of the field even though they wanted to see their mama, you know. And so I had to be the hard ass on that.
What was your rank? Are you private or corporal or what?
Well, I was an E4, a Spec 4.
Would that be equivalent to a corporal?
Yeah.
So did you have corporal stripes?
No, Spec 4 has its own or symbol.
Mm-hmm. I've seen some pictures. I don't remember right now, but did you have the cross on your helmets or not?
No.
Because of the enemy?
Yeah, medics tried to look like, that's one of the main reasons why medics carried M16s instead of a 45, because they wanted to look as much as possible like a grunt.
Mm-hmm. Did you ever have to go on any medevac flights? Or help load wounded onto a medevac?
Well, the medics were always the ones that loaded the wounded.
So tell me about an experience. So you worked with the Hueys, you worked around the Hueys.
Oh yeah.
Hot landing zones maybe, whatever?
Yes. We sometimes we just walked off Stinson into the bush, but usually we did what they called a combat assault somewhere. And that's another thing about being a medic, is that you're always on the first helicopter in and the last helicopter out, because they need a medic on the ground. And so I was always in the first helicopter for my platoon. I want to answer your question, but could you repeat your question?
Yeah, we're fine. Don't ever,
Oh, I know, but this is important.
Okay, I want to ask you something. You actually were involved in combat assaults on a helicopter? So they would insert your platoon or company into a hot area?
Well, usually we didn't know if it was going to be hot.
But my question is
yes,
you worked with the Hueys?
Oh yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah, we were an air mobile unit.
Well,
we had more helicopters than any other unit in Vietnam.
Oh wow, my Vietnam film focused on the Air Mobile Division. Did you watch my Vietnam film?
I don't remember.
Okay, we'll talk about that later. But that focused on the Air Mobile Division and my fascination with the Huey helicopters and the transport, and they were medevacs, and they brought in supplies, they took out the wounded, they took troops into combat. Tell me about some of your missions going into combat assaults. Walk me through one, what you saw as you approached. Was it a hot LZ? Were you receiving fire and just going into a hot LZ or going into being inserted?
Okay, there's one that I remember well, because one of the guys in it that won the Medal of Honor. What happened was it was another time when all the fire bases were being hit, and they took one of our platoons they flew it to landing zone Stinson to help protect it from getting overrun more. And so we were only 2 platoons. We had 35 men total, because we'd lost so many that our 2 platoons together was 35 men. And so it was May 8th, 1970, and there was shit going on all over that night. You know, we were watching lots of flares and artillery on the different places that were getting hit. And one of the places that was getting hit was a Marine place nearby called Cap 132, Combined Action Platoon. And so what they had like a dozen or so Marines, and then they had a platoon of Vietnamese Popular Forces. So there was like 40 all there together there. But there was an NVA regiment of about 400 that attacked this small Marine outpost, Cap 132, and so we got a call at 2 in the morning that they were going to airlift what was left of our company, the 35 guys, to help rescue this cap that was overrun. And so they showed up at about 4 in the morning and they had 5 helicopters for us. We were going to be 7 grunts in per helicopter, and then there was also 4 Huey gunships. We liked the Huey gunships better than the Cobras because the Cobras they were too fast. They couldn't hover, you know. They just and the Cobras had enclosed cockpits, so the pilots couldn't hear anything. They couldn't tell what was going on. But we had Huey gunships, and so and then they had a command and control helicopter, which was a Loach, a small helicopter, and so they lifted us. They took us off, and by the time we got there, it was about 5 a.m., so it was still dark. You could see a little bit of light in the east, but it was still dark. And as we flew in, the post had been overrun, but the NVA were starting to withdraw. But there was still an active firefight going on. And so as we were flying in, you could see the green tracers and the red tracers going back and forth. And so the helicopters, when they came in, they didn't land because it was a rice paddy. So they just kind of slowed down. And so when we jumped out, they were doing maybe 5 or 10 miles an hour. And we were maybe like 6 feet off the ground. And so when I jumped out, the pack kind of, because a medic has a really heavy pack, you know, because there wasn't any plastic stuff. It was like all our Ringer's lactate and normal saline and everything for injections was in one quart glass bottles. And, you know, we had heavy packs because I had all this gear. And so I fell forward into the mud. The water in the rice paddy was maybe, you know, 6 inches or a foot deep, and my glasses came off, and I can't see without my glasses. So the other guys ran up to the perimeter, and I was out there alone, fumbling around in the mud trying to find my glasses because I wasn't quite sure which way to go. And then I got up to the perimeter, and there was dead NVA bodies all over the place. They counted, there was 26 bodies inside the perimeter, and they figured, you know, 50 or 100 more out in the fields. So we got up online, and I still had, I had my M16, and so initially we were online with them helping suppress the enemy, and then I started pretty soon working on casualties, and there was, you know, I don't know, maybe 15 casualties, and we lost 3 of them. Died. 3 of them died before the medevacs could come.
From Delta Company?
No, they were all. I don't think Delta Company lost. Well, it was just first platoon and third platoon. Okay. Yeah, so it was Delta Company, but I don't think we lost anybody in that fight. But there was the guy that won the Medal of Honor was killed, and
Did you see what he did to get the Medal of Honor, or you just heard about it later?
Well, I saw what he did. He was already dead when I got there, but he was a machine gunner, and he'd held down a whole corner of the perimeter by himself, and he had gotten charged by probably 25 NVA, and he killed several of them before they killed him.
Do you remember his name?
Yeah, Miguel Keith.
Miguel Keith?
Keith.
Wow, you've got a good memory there. So, was it often that you did combat assaults, or just a few in Vietnam? Or you said you were an air mobile. What did you call yourself? Air mobile company, or?
Yeah, not officially, but we were. We were just called the Light Infantry Company, but we did most of our stuff with helicopters, and so we did dozens of them. In fact, they had what they called eagle flights, where we'd start off in the morning, and they would fly us out to some spot where you were likely to find somebody bad, and they would drop us off. And if nothing happened, they would come in, pick us up, fly somewhere else, and drop us off. And sometimes we would land in one day in 6 or 8 places, hoping that we'd get shot at. At least the brass was hoping we'd get shot at. And sometimes we would be, and sometimes we weren't. But those were called eagle flights. And so we did eagle flights all the time. And then when we were going somewhere the terrain was near the coast. It was basically a flat plain with interspersed hills of 100 to 500 feet high, and then there was the enemy's mountains, which in the area that we were in were 3,000 to 5,000 feet high, and then a little further back, they were occasionally, there was peaks of 8,000 or 9,000 feet high, and it was all triple canopy all the way to the top. And they would send us on missions back in there also. We weren't always in the plain where the civilians were. We were often in the enemy's mountains.
You had no family. I mean, mail call, I think, would be important in that situation in war. So did you ever get any mail while you were over there?
No, I never received one letter or sent one letter, except I was corresponding with the National Park Service in Fairbanks. That was the only letter I sent in Vietnam.
Does that make you feel sad now thinking about that, or was it like it didn't really matter at the time?
I just became a loner. I didn't really want any interaction with people.
But you obviously had to be with your men, and tell me, I ask this question often, define combat.
Human insanity. It's when everything's gone off the rails and there are no rules and there are no principles.
Did the casualties that you treated, did like now thinking back over 50 years, is it like a blur, or do you remember vividly some of these people that you treated, or all of them?
It's a progression. Toward the beginning of my tour, I have vivid memories, and then as it goes on, my memory fades out. It's like supposedly medics were only supposed to serve 6 months in the field and then get rotated back to a hospital. And that wasn't because the Army was nice. That was because usually after 6 months, we mentally and physically weren't worth shit. I mean, we weren't worth anything. And so they just, we were a disposable object after 6 months. But the problem was we were losing so many medics. Like the last, after I went to Chippewa and spent 5 months on Chippewa, during that 5 months, the 1st to the 52nd had 10 medics killed.
That's what you were a part of?
Yeah, that was my battalion.
So, I'm just amazed by your story. I mean, I've interviewed a few Navy corpsmen in World War II, Korea, I think 1 or 2 in Vietnam. I don't know if I have an Army medic story in Vietnam, so this is very interesting to me. I might have one, I just don't remember in my archives. But what was I going to ask you? As far as, okay, give me just a summary of some of the injuries that you saw. I mean, gunshot, shrapnel, you used white phosphorus. Give me kind of a summary of what you saw, and then give me a couple more examples of who you treated and were you able to help them. Like that white phosphorus sounds to me like one of the most horrendous things you saw. Is that right? That was probably one of the worst, or were there worse?
There was other things that were just as bad. One of the most common injury was to the lower torso. Because of the booby traps. A lot of times, depending on the type of booby trap, the body would be missing parts all the way up to the waist, you know. And there's a lot of times where the booby trap would blow all the flesh off, and you're just looking at 2 legs like from a skeleton. And that was very common. And so that was probably the worst thing, just because we weren't just dealing with soldiers, we were also dealing with civilians, because a lot of civilians who hit booby traps. And so I was dealing, like, I remember Easter, April 27th, on Easter, we were out in the field, and there was 2 women kind of jogging across the field towards us, and there was a blanket tied to a pole that they were carrying between them, you know, and they came up to me, and there was a little boy inside who was probably 8 or 10 years old, and his legs, he had hit a booby trap, and his legs were all destroyed. And so in cases like that, we would call a medevac, and they would take them to the civilian hospital in Quang Ngai City. But that happened, you know, it's like there was another incident where the kids were we'd have actual ambushes, which I went out on almost every night because a medic had to be on the ambush. But we'd also set up mechanical ambushes, which are claymores, and sometimes we'd put out like 10 mechanical ambushes around where we were instead of sending out real troops. And one time these kids were late getting back to the village, and we'd already set out mechanical ambushes, and they were bringing a water buffalo back home. And so a claymore went off and did in the water buffalo and a bunch of these kids, you know, and so the medics had to go look at that, you know.
I'm just amazed by what you've gone through. I'm sitting here interviewing you, thinking about people out there living their lives. Do they even know about these things that have happened to you and how it's affected you and changed you, and you're never the same? And you're a young man in Vietnam, and how many, you know, men have experienced a lot of these things, but were you able to help some of the wounded? I mean, obviously, yes. I mean, they didn't all die, right? But you got to help them, and there was some pride in the fact that you helped them. And would you stay with them until the helicopter came, or would you just leave them?
We would always stay with them and load them.
What was that like? I mean, does a radio man call in the medevac? Was it for one person or 10 people, or how does that work?
Yeah, the RTO calls for the medevac, and you know, there were some miracles. I remember one with a guy named Paul. I won't say his last name because he likes his privacy. Mm-hmm. But he was an RTO, and we'd gotten ambushed by an NVA battalion, and so there was like several hundred rounds that we received, and he was up toward the front, and the NVA, well, it was getting dark, and we were late for doing a night defensive position. I'm not sure why, but there was a stream that had a bridge over it, and several of the company had gone across the bridge, and I don't know if it was because it was getting dark or somebody blew it, but the NVA sprang the ambush too soon, because they could have got us all out in this field and really done a job on our whole company. But so taking a lot of automatic fire, and one of the guys in front was a Lieutenant Thomas, and he was an FO, a forward observer, and those are the ones that call in artillery, and he had his own radio man, but his radio man wasn't right there, and the lieutenant was calling for him, say, get over here, I got to call in airstrike. And the radio man froze and wouldn't come. So Paul, who was one of our company radio men, said, I'll do it. And so he runs up there, and Paul's actually calling in the artillery to save our ass. And he gets shot, and he gets shot in the chest, and it's a sucking chest wound. And he later told me that he didn't know that it was bad that he knew he felt like a kick, you know, and he was wearing a flak jacket, which probably slowed down the bullet. But there was a hole in his chest, and he kept calling in artillery support until he passed out. And so there was calls of medic, and so two of us medics, or three, I can't remember, but we got up to Paul, and we were still receiving automatic weapons fire at this time. And so there wasn't any exit wound, and so we, with a sucking chest wound, you seal it off. You put plastic on, Vaseline and plastic, and seal it. And so if it's not sucking, the chest can reinflate, you know, the lungs can reinflate. But so we called in a medevac, and his heart kept stopping. So we were doing CPR on him, and we got his heart restarted several times. And so when the medevac came in, the first two times it tried to land, it was taking too much fire, so it took off again. And the third time, the pilot must have just said, screw it, you know. And he came in, and it almost looked like a crash because he came in so fast and hard. And so we were putting Paul on the medevac, and the lieutenant, the forward observer, was helping load him. And so the forward observer got shot, I think, in the shoulder or arm. And so we loaded him on too, and the medevac took off. And we did, at first, for a while, we didn't know if Paul, we kind of assumed that maybe he died. But we found out later that they took him to, there was two hospitals, there's 91st Evac and 27th Surge. I think they took him to 27th Surge probably because it was closer. Anyway, they x-rayed him, and they saw that the bullet was, the AK-47 round was inside his heart. It had pierced his heart and stopped inside his heart. And so they opened him up, and the bullet wasn't there. And the bullet had been pumped out of the heart, and it was now in an artery. So they cut the artery open and removed the bullet, sewed him up, and he lived. And he's alive today. He lives in California. And
Miracle.
yeah.
So his first name is Paul.
Yep.
Okay, and do you remember if it was the 91st? The reason I'm asking is I have a nurse I've interviewed that worked with the 91st.
Oh, it could have been. I don't know.
91st is in July?
Yeah, they're both in Chulai. 91st and 27th are both in Chulai.
Well,
yeah,
that's interesting.
So this was I can tell you the date.
Oh, that's okay. No.
Oh, but it was in April, I think, of 1970.
Wow. Wow. Have you said you're alone, or did you stay in touch with anybody after Vietnam? You know Paul. I mean, how did Paul come back into your life, and are you in touch with anybody else from Vietnam?
I wasn't for many years until after 9/11. When 9/11 happened, that's when my PTSD really exploded, and then after that, I was able to. Well, actually, I got a phone call from this guy out of the blue, and he said, "Are you Doc Bartlett?" And it was a guy from Alaska who was searching for other first to 52nd members, and so after that, I started going to first to the 52nd reunions, and that's where Paul and I reconnected.
Was it emotional when you met him again? Did you give him a hug? Would you guys embrace? I mean,
yes, we embraced. Yeah.
Boy, that's amazing.
Yeah, he later became a distance runner,
And he's the one that had the bullet in his heart, went to his
Right.
artery, they cut it out.
Yeah.
Did he keep the bullet?
Yes, the doc gave him the bullet. He still has it.
Well, you tell him I said thank you for what he did in Vietnam, and also tell him that Larry wants to interview him, if he'd ever be open to that. I'll let you take that as a whole.
Yeah, it's like he did an interview for one of the, I can't remember one, but it was a one that's been doing veterans interviews, and I watched his interview, and he talked about the incident in the interview.
Oh, okay.
And he never mentioned the fact that the bullet was in his heart. He just ignored that whole thing in the interview.
Okay, but we'll talk about that. So I'm going to start to wind down this part of our interview, and then we'll take a break for lunch, and then we'll come back. But I'm not rushing anything today. I'm honoring your time here, and I'm in no rush. Normally we would stop at an hour. We're almost at an hour and 20 minutes right now, but we're okay.
Okay.
But I would love to continue talking about your combat experiences. I know we could, and I'd be fascinated. I'm sure a lot of my YouTube audience would be too. But what got you through the hard times? Was it just your training? Did you have faith in God? What got you through those difficult, chaotic, crazy times?
I had sort of a relationship with God. I became acutely aware of good and evil. And I was a fan of the writer C.S. Lewis. I don't know if you know about him, but I read Mere Christianity. And in fact, I was a fan of both Lewis and Tolkien, and I called Vietnam Mordor when I was there, just because I felt like I was in Mordor. And just the struggle between good and evil, I think, kept me going because I wanted to be on the side of good.
So you prayed at times maybe, or talked to God, and
well, that whole thing's probably a topic for the next part of this.
Let me ask you this, a couple more things about combat. When you were treating the wounded, obviously it might have gone in shock, maybe not, but was there a conversation between you and the wounded? I mean, were you trained to say things, or was it just spontaneous, like, hang in there, hold on, you're going to be okay, or what would you say to these people?
It was everything from the tragic to the comical. There was one guy that his ass was all busted up, and we were putting a big bandage on him, and he said, "Doc, don't you think I'm a little old for diapers?" I mean, this guy was real bad shape, and he still had a sense of humor. So anything could happen, as far as words.
How do they die in the battlefield? Do they die violently or peacefully, or both?
Every way. I had one guy that was shot between the eyes, and he was dead instantly. Some were in agonizing pain, screaming. Some just kind of faded out. So it was the whole gamut of different scenarios.
To kind of contemporize this, and forgive me for using Hollywood because they never get it right, but did you ever see Saving Private Ryan?
Yes, I did.
Okay, just the beginning of that movie, the landing on Omaha Beach, the medic, and you can follow the medic throughout the video, and he gets killed. And then, did you ever see Forrest Gump?
Yes.
The scene in Vietnam where he's carrying the wounded, and then they're in the jungle and the attacks. Does any of that even come close to maybe what you experienced, or is that what it really looks or sounds like, either one of those movies, or is it far worse than that, or were those good depictions, I guess?
They were good depictions. There was also good depictions in We Were Soldiers in Platoon, but nothing can come anything like reality, because the violence is extreme, all the senses are at their utmost extreme, and the fear of death is real, and you can't, there's no way to incorporate reality into a movie. That's fine. So yeah, they're good, but they're nothing like reality.
Yeah, yeah. You gave me several names and things. I'm going to jump ahead and come back, but have you ever been to the Vietnam Wall in Washington?
No.
Okay.
I've seen the traveling wall.
Mm-hmm. And was that tough for you to see that? Did you see names of the people that were killed that you knew?
Well, actually, I never went up to the wall. In fact, that's how I got connected with the VA, because I'd gone there on 2 different days, and I just stopped. It was in a park, and I just stopped off a ways with my back to a tree, and I never approached the wall. Mm-hmm. And this guy came up to me and said that he was a VA counselor, and he was wondering if I'd ever heard of PTSD, and that's, so mm-hmm. I never did go up to the wall.
Okay. The one photo that you gave me was a memorial service, and you had the invocation, the prayer, there was a chaplain,
right.
There was a prayer, at the very bottom there was a scripture verse out of the book of Revelation, I am the resurrection and the life, he that comes to me, okay. There's an arrow that shows you in that picture, but do you know what picture I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Can you describe that picture? There's 3 M16s, helmets on them. Do you remember the guys' names? Because you mentioned them, they were killed in February and March of 70. But just tell me about the picture in that service. You were at that service.
I was at that service, and that service was given by Phil Nichols, and I remember more about him than, I don't remember the names that were there, because we had several events like that. But Phil Nichols was a logger. He was a man's man. He played the guitar, and most of his services out in the bush were with a guitar. And he was one of the guys that was killed on October 13th.
A part of that group that was killed on the top of that hill?
Yes.
Yeah. He was chaplain?
Yes. Chaplain Phil Nichols.
Good guy.
Yes. Cool. I was the medic for Geister. I wasn't the medic for Hannigan. Lieutenant Geister made a fatal mistake. He was killed. There was 2 other guys that lost their legs that I don't remember, but what happened was we were on patrol, and of course the French had been there only 15 years earlier, and so there was lots of French like ruined forts and stuff left from the French. And Lieutenant Geister and these other 2 guys went over to the French fort, and I remember thinking, oh, this is bad. And then Lieutenant Geister was killed, and the 2 guys that were with him lost their legs. So yes, I remember that very much. I know, I can't remember what happened to Hannigan.
Okay. It's a sucking chest wound.
Ah.
Yeah.
That's a common way to die.
We got to wind down, but I mean, I don't know if this is going to be our next interview, but how How has this changed you? I mean, you came back from Vietnam probably different, right?
It is profoundly changed my entire life, and mostly for the worst. I believe largely lost the ability to feel love. I got so, it's like when I was in Vietnam, the way I got through it was assuming that I was already dead, and that transferred to my feelings and emotions and relationships.
After Vietnam?
After Vietnam and until now.
So, I mean, I can tell it's affected you. The PTSD, do sights, smells, and sounds bring back Vietnam to you today?
Oh, very much. In fact, they even cause hallucinations. You know, it's like I was in a place recently where there was wallpaper on the wall, and in my mind, the wallpaper somehow translated to rice paddies and a tree line. And I just felt like I wanted to hit the ground in this room because of the wallpaper on the wall. So, you know, it's just, yeah, especially like, it's like we'd get new clothes, like sometimes when we were out for 21 days, sometimes we'd go all 21 days in the same clothes. And so there was times when my pants were stiff with dried blood, and just the feel of the dried blood and the smell of the dried blood on my pants that I would sleep in every night. You know, there's smells that are overpowering. The smell of mosquito repellent. Because I just, you know, we had leeches, you know, and they'd get leeches on every part of the body, you know, and so I'd remove the leeches on the guys with mosquito repellent, and so I stunk like, you know, we'd bathe in it, you know, at night, just otherwise you'd end up a massive mosquito hives in the morning. So yeah, there's lots of smells that get me.
How about a helicopter going overhead?
Well, I told you I was living in the Philippines for a while, and they were fighting ISIS at that time. I was on the island of Cebu, and the main military base was on Cebu. I can't remember the name of it, but anyway, they were still using Vietnam era Hueys, and so in my apartment in the Philippines, and this was just 10 years ago, the Hueys would take off and go to war in the morning, you know, and I was like, you know, I would just, matter of fact, there was one time when I freaked out, and Princess had to take me to the hospital because I was having a panic attack. She took me to Cebu Doctor's Hospital because I was just out of it.
Are you 100% disabled?
Yes.
Okay. Tell me about your last day in Vietnam.
My last day in Vietnam, I was, well, the last 2 days, I was on landing zone Chippewa right up until my deros. And so the last day in Vietnam, I don't remember because I was so out of it. I know I went to a processing center and we waited for, you know, like 3 times a day. They'd call out the names of whoever was going on that flight. I think I was in that processing center for a day or 2. But I don't really, I mean, when I got back from Vietnam, that's a whole nother story because I totally disengaged from society when I got back. I went off and hid in the mountains. literally, by
So-
myself.
So when you got home, you flew into where? Travis? Oakland?
I don't know. They sent me for discharge, they sent me to Dugway Proving Grounds in Utah, but I don't know.
That's interesting.
I don't know where I came in at this. I think it was in Washington. I think it was Seattle. I can't remember. I don't remember.
One more question back in Vietnam. Drugs and alcohol usage. And did you ever engage? Did that ever help relieve the tension? Was it prevalent at that time?
Well, not in the bush. Anybody using in the bush would get Article 15, and because you just can't have it in the bush. Back in the rear, the times that we got to go to Stinson, I smoked grass, used opium a couple times, but there was on Chippewa, when I was the medic there, it was partly a penal place, and they would send guys with heroin addiction out to Chippewa to dry out. I had to deal with that.
So you worked on a base at a medical facility at Chippewa?
Well, Chippewa was only 12 men.
Oh, okay.
I was the only medic. There was no officer. It was
So
just,
where was Chippewa? A base, a fire base?
we better do that next
Okay.
one, because it's complicated.
Okay, when you sign your emails HERD, what does HERD mean?
Well, that was our nickname for our platoon, just because it rhymed. The third herd.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, we'll get into that. So you come home from Vietnam. You don't remember exactly where you processed out of, but you know you came home. Where did you find yourself a week, a day, a week later? Were you on a bus? Were you walking into the mountains? Tell me about that transition, and how long did you stay like that?
Several months until I ran out of money. Because you can't spend money in Vietnam, so I had mustering out money, and then I could get unemployment, so I'd come out once a week to get my unemployment check, but I lived in a tent up in the mountains near Virginia City, Nevada.
But when you got out of the military and you came home, did you have one of these, they spit on you, they cursed at you, they called you baby killers and threw trash and crap at you? Or did you go through any of that when you processed home?
I didn't go through any of that. I think the worst thing I felt was I'd had a girlfriend before I left for Vietnam, and when I got back, they had phone booths in those days, and I stopped on Virginia Street, and I called her and says, I'm back from Vietnam. I'd just like a cup of coffee with you. And she said, no, I'm seeing somebody else. I don't want to have coffee with you.
And you had no family waiting for you?
I had a brother, but we were kind of out of touch at that point.
But didn't you come home like, you want to tell somebody about it, or just want to forget it all?
When I got back, I didn't want anything to do with any of it. I just wanted to. It was severely affecting me, but and that's a real long story too.
So PTSD, anything in life that's traumatic, and of course war. So the things you experienced, the things you saw, all of that is why you are how you are today, right? Because of that Vietnam experience. It just Can I use a word that you said? It told you. Maybe this is the next interview, but it tore you in half emotionally.
Well, let me tell you this. When I got back, I married a girl named Leah, and we had 2 daughters. And after we'd been married for 8 years, she drowned. And I got a call at work saying, this is the sheriff's department. Your wife is missing in the Peck River. So I drive out there, and there's a bunch of search and rescue guys kind of on the bank fiddling around with their equipment. And I said, screw this, I'm going to go find her. So I started downriver, and in a couple hundred yards, I found her on the bottom. And so I pulled her out, and I started trying to do CPR on her. And her lungs, I could tell they were full of water, and it was making the same sound that a sucking chest wound makes. And I just said, well, she's dead. And I never cried. I went back to work the next day. I never consoled my daughters. I just acted like I'd put her on a helicopter, and because you put them on the helicopter, you never hear about them again. And so I put her on the helicopter, and I never heard about her again. I never cried. I never went through a grieving for her. I still haven't.
Wow. You said that your mother died. How did she die?
She shot herself with my father's service revolver. She had severe mental problems, schizophrenia. Like, what put her in the hospital was, I remember she was standing in the living room naked and screaming, and then she went running around the neighborhood screaming naked, and so they put her in a sanitarium after that. And they let her out on Thanksgiving 1956, and they let her, they gave her like a pass, and so she found my dad's service revolver and then shot herself. And then my brother and I never got to go to her funeral because her family was Catholic, and if you shoot yourself when you're Catholic, you go to hell. And so we weren't allowed, my brother and I weren't allowed to go to her funeral.
Yeah. Are you close with your brother today?
At times. He's also a Vietnam vet. He didn't experience combat, but we both experienced severe child abuse in other situations, and so it's like recently we didn't speak for 3 years. Now we're speaking again.
So I want to finish this interview. Okay, so you've come home from Vietnam. Looking back now, all these years later, I hope it's okay to ask you this. If you don't want to answer, that's fine. But what does freedom mean to you today, after everything you've been through, the things you saw on the battlefield, the freedoms we still have in this country? What does freedom mean to you?
Well, I think I really appreciate our country because of something that happened to me in Vietnam. Was that the reason I was pulled from Delta Company and sent to Chippewa was that I spoke what I felt was truth to power. And in many countries, I would have been put up against a wall and shot. And I was not treated well by all of those I was opposing, but I was treated fairly by America. I was not put up against a wall and shot. And so I would say freedom is the ability that we have in America to speak truth to power and not be afraid of the consequences. So I appreciate that freedom. And it's a wonderful country, because in so many countries of the world, I just would have been put up against the wall and shot for what I said and did.
And the price for freedom? You saw men die in the battlefield. But tell me about the price for freedom.
I guess the price for freedom is holding on to real values and not giving in when something goes astray, even if it's your government, you know.
How about the flag? What does the American flag mean or represent to you?
It's difficult. I don't hang a flag at my home. But you know, another word for flag is a standard. And our flag, that flag, stands for the highest standards. And our country doesn't always follow the highest standards. And so, I don't know, I respect our flag very much. But things happen often that make me wonder. It's like last 4th of July, I have a Vietnam outfit with a helmet and the whole thing, a medic outfit. And I was marching in the 4th of July parade, and I was holding a peace flag. I was carrying a peace flag. And this veteran came out who had a bunch of medals, you know, and he came out to me in the parade, and he kind of sneered at me and he said, "A peace flag? Really?" You know? And it was like just so hostile because I wanted peace. And I forget the question.
Just about the flag, what it meant to you.
Oh,
yeah.
It means very, very much to me.
Yeah. Are you proud to be a Vietnam veteran?
Oh, yeah. The guys I served with, they were my lieutenant, my platoon sergeant, the other medics, the guys in my platoon. They were just great, great people.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm very proud of them. Not of me, but of them.
What were you thinking last night about this interview today? What were your thoughts about today?
I couldn't sleep. I just had all these memories rushing into my mind, and I was trying to write them down, and I was thinking, "Oh, it's important. It's important. I need to tell all this." And so I was just kind of in a frenzy last night with being overwhelmed by memories of Vietnam.
Do you think we've talked about a lot that you wanted to talk about?
Yes.
Is there anything on that paper you want to read now and tell me about, or I'm not sure what's on there.
I think I need a break.
Okay, so we're gonna end our interview now. Okay.
Yes.
Now, do you know what I do at the end of my interviews?
Yes.
Okay. Is it okay if I ask
Yes,
you to
sir.
salute in the
Yes,
camera
sir.
from where you're seated?
Yes, sir.
So I'm just gonna reposition the camera just a little bit here. And when you're ready, I want you, if you want to say something, fine. If not, just look into the camera, Doc, and give a salute. Great. Perfect. I just want to thank you on camera for coming out here from Reno. And I wish you many more years of health. That's my prayer for you.
Thank you.
And that somehow this story will, I have no doubt this story will touch many lives across the world. And I'm just thankful that you chose me to tell your story, help tell your story.
Thank you.
God bless you. Doc Bartlett, Thank you.
Thank you.